Josh Hennig here is hanging with Hennig on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app powered by First Bank. And we are live as always, streaming on YouTube, X, and Instagram. Thanks to Dr. Squatch Natural Soap. I'm so excited to be joined by my guest here because it is Mental Health Awareness Month for men. Not just general mental health, it's men, because we know, as my guest will tell you, if you're listening on the radio, you can't see him, but he's nodding his head. We all know as men, there's typically a trend to tell us how we should think, how we should feel. It is 2014 NFL first-round pick of the Philadelphia Eagles from Louisville. Marcus Smith joins me. Marcus, how you doing today?
Man, doing great. Excellent. I appreciate that. That was cool. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, listen, you are more than just a former NFL player. You are the founder of the Circle of M. It's a nonprofit. It goes out of your way to help people. And before we get to all of that, I want to get your perspective, because as a former NFL player, this is a weird time of year. We're a month removed from when teams report the training camp. Teams like the Eagles and others. Like, this is kind of like that dead period. Talk about, from a player's perspective, what is this window like for guys?
Yeah, man, it's actually a crucial window because you have started OTAs and then you get into your mini camps, and you kind of see what the team is made of. Right, you kind of see who the new players are going to be, how you're going to interact with each other, what package you're going to use. So in this off season, it's very important for you to stay hydrated, to stay intact with the team and some of your teammates, start that training process, and bring the mentality back to camp. So it's almost like 4 to 5 weeks of getting your body ready to handle 17, 18-week season. So that's what the players are going through right now. Sometimes players, right after minicamp, they go take maybe 3 or 4 days off just to be with their family, and then it's right back into football so they can get ready for the season, because guys are trying to win, and they're trying to host that Lombardi Trophy.
You mentioned about the Lombardi Trophy. One of the conversations last year with the Eagles was the fact that Vic Fangio, first-year coordinator, and he took a different approach than some other guys. He said, hey, I'm trying to go out here and just force-feed these guys as much information in OTAs and training camp, so when they get to the season, it's going to be easy. But there's the gap still. There's a gap between OTAs and minicamp and then training camp. So how would a player then handle a coach basically like feeding him all this information, and then all of a sudden he's out of the building for 5-6 weeks?
Yeah, I think it's very important for us to lean on our teammates, especially if it's a new player. And I think that a lot of times, like somebody like BG, or like I had a Trent Cole or Connor Barwin, like we would all get together, we would text each other and try to go over some of the plays and some of the things that we would be doing in camp, right? We tried to stay intact with, the team, the camaraderie. I think that's, very important. So you kind of draw these things up on a board as you're training, as you're getting ready for the season. And then once you actually get into that, it's like no brainer. And what happens is, right, you start with phase one. Phase one is usually install one. So it takes you all the way through the last mini camp with the last install. So you have had all the installs. And then what happens when you get to camp, you start back on install one usually, right? So now you're starting back at phase one, but you've already seen the whole playbook, right? And so when you go back to phase one, that's what the coaches are talking about. They're like, wow, like, well, I've already done this. I had a whole spring of this. So it should be a no-brainer. Once you get into camp, we should hit the ground running. It shouldn't really be too much coaching. The only coaching that it should be is like certain technique issues, but the plays should be all in and ready to go.
By the way, speaking of Connor Barwin, next Saturday we will be at Connor Barwin's Make the World Better pickleball tournament in Sea Isle City. We'll be broadcasting here on 97.3 ESPN. You didn't even know that. It's just perfect symmetry by you, Marcus Smith. Of course, we used to play for the Eagles. I got to ask you about the Eagles because you mentioned all the teammates you played with. Obviously, Brandon Graham just retired. And, I remember one of the things that it made me chuckle a little bit. I've heard him say multiple times in interviews, he said the biggest thing for him now he's retired is He wants to get into beach shape. He wanted to lose all the excess weight that he had. Is that something guys like struggle with? We're talking about men's mental health awareness month. Is the keeping the weight on? Is it the eating? How much of that is a tax on guys mentally?
It is a tax. It's a huge tax. It's a struggle. I'm gonna say that if I can just be honest and frank. Like some of us really do stay in shape, but it is a struggle to be able to stay on that regimen and routine because you've been playing football your whole entire life, and then mentally, you when you retire, it's like, man, like I just want to take a break, right? And then if you take too much long of a break, you get out of that football, that in shape that you would be if you was playing football. And so you keep going down this path of like, man, I don't really feel like doing anything. And then you start to see guys kind of blow up and not be in as much shape as they was. But I would say that it is really tough to stay in shape because of the wear and tear on your body. 90% of football players feel that wear and tear, and they just want to take a mental break first and then a physical break because of the body. You know, it's a lot of things that go into trying to play a 17-week season. But then you have guys like Brandon Graham who can go in and actually work out and still look, the part and try to get the weight down so he can give other guys the confidence. But most guys, it's really tough to do. It was tough for me to do mentally, you know what I mean? But it can be done.
What was it? You mentioned it was tough for you. Was it tougher like the discipline? Was it tougher the eating habits? Was it tougher the routine? Like what was it for you as a player that you were like, man, that part of the process was really the biggest challenge?
Yeah, so one of the hardest things as a football player that you deal with is the schedule and the routine of it, because now you have to create your own schedule. You have to do it yourself. And with football, you have everything kind of like laid out for you, especially in the off season. So it's a little bit different when you're done playing because you don't have the same things anymore in play because you're not actually going to play for a season. You're really just getting your body back in shape. So the schedule and not having everything in order in the way that you want it, it kind of makes like you feel like you're not moving in the right direction, and it gives you this thing in your mind that you feel like, oh man, well I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do, and then you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, and you find yourself maybe sitting on the couch, right, watching the game instead of going to work out because you've gotten further and further away from like your goals and to reach your goals. And so even guys like having to insert themselves back into their families, right? Think about that when they have to go in back into their families because I mean they're gone a lot of the weeks in a season. So now they have to find out where they fit in. So they're trying to juggle not only family, but trying to be themselves and get a workout themselves. So that is taxing mentally as well, to try to be all that you can be for a husband, as a father, and then also take care of yourself.
We're talking with Marcus Smith. Of course, he is the founder of the Circle of M, the nonprofit. And of course, he is the 2014 Philadelphia Eagles first-round draft pick. Joining me here on 97.3 ESPN, Josh Hennig, streaming live in the Dr. Squatch virtual studios. You talked about transition. I got to ask you, because in college, you led the nation in sacks. You had 16 sacks at Louisville. You were just all-out beast mode that year. And then you come to the NFL, and it seemed like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you correct me, okay? From my eyeballs, it really seemed like that transition from college to the NFL, having to switch from what you were being asked to do in college to then going to that Billy Davis defense, it really was a hindrance because I know, at least for my eyeballs, and again, you correct me if I'm wrong, but for my eyeballs, you seemed like you were way more comfortable with Jim Schwartz as a coordinator, for example, than it was Billy Davis. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that would definitely be a fair assessment. If you look at my style of play in college, I kind of was all over the place, and my coaches kind of put me where I would need to be. Sometimes I played middle, sometimes I played outside. But it was a struggle. I'm not gonna lie, it was a struggle for me being in that defense because I'm strictly an outside linebacker. But I think when Jim Schwartz came into play, it was more so like, I just want you to play. I don't want you to think about anything. I want your hand to be in the dirt, and I want you to go and get after it. But obviously, my first year having struggles, it was a culture shock for me coming into the NFL, being in that system. And quite frankly, I didn't play well. And then the second year when I was doing better, then you get hurt, right? You get injured, and then you're not able to play as much as you want. And then now your third year comes, and the GM and everybody's looking at you like, hey man, we need you to really, step it up. And so that's a lot of pressure coming along with that. And I quite frankly just didn't do well with the pressure. And I'm not afraid to say that. And that's why, I really speak on the mental health aspect of the players. I try to help them, guide them through their seasons, and not allow them to step away from the game, but more so push them forward so they can have the best careers. You know what I mean? And that's all I want,
You mentioned about helping players now, obviously after a 5-year NFL career. And I want you to recount just a quick summary for those who don't know, because at the end of your NFL career, there was a moment where you got to hit rock bottom. You wrote about it in the Players Tribune a few years ago. And I want to ask you, and I know this might sound like a double-edged sword here, but you mentioned about helping players now. Is there something that you know now that you look back at your career and like there's a part of you that like drives you to say, I didn't know this when I was younger. I know this now. And I'm like, it's almost like divine inspiration that I have to help people with this one aspect.
Yes, for sure. And that is having a team, a therapist, a life coach, a person that you can confide in and talk to about the day-to-day things that you're going through as an athlete, as a football player. Because I didn't speak. I kept silent. I didn't talk about some of the struggles that I was having. I didn't talk about the anxiety, the depression. I didn't talk about any of those things. And then I hit rock bottom once I went to Seattle. But I had just signed a deal with Seattle, and it was actually a good deal with them that I could play another year. It was basically a prove-it deal, and it was an opportunity for me to play. But I was really dying in the inside because I hadn't really addressed a lot of the issues that I had been dealing with. And so that's all I do now. I help guys get into treatment, guys who are having mental breakdowns like I did. They go to Refine Recovery, or they go to APN, or they go to Menninger. I just try to help them go to the places that could help them get to a place where they can go back to the sport and be phenomenal at the sport. See, I walked away, and when I walked away, I was able to finish that year. But then I realized when I talked to some of my teammates from Seattle, not going to say any names, but a lot of those guys were dealing with the same thing I was going through at the same exact time. And so that's when I knew that, okay, if I step up and speak, then it's going to help a lot of the players in the long run. And so that's what all I would say. What I know now is to have a team around you that is not only physical, but mental as well, because we do everything backwards. We always do physical first and then mental, but it's always the mental first and then physical. That's what really gets you through, and that's what really helps you become the player that you want to be.
We're talking with Marcus Smith. So again, 5-year in the NFL, first-round draft pick, 2014 NFL draft. Spent your time with the Eagles, then went to Seattle. So give the audience just a quick synopsis, right? So the journey from you hit rock bottom, you had to refine, recalibrate, right? You got your faith in right, you got your family in right, you got everything recalibrated over time, and then you started the circle of M. So kind of like give the audience like that lineup there, so they understand like how this went. Because like I said, first round draft pick, you're the top of the mountain, right? You're like, I'm doing great, and then basically 4 years later, you're you're at the bottom, mentally, emotionally. And so now from that moment to now, kind of give the audience like an understanding of like what that was like for you.
Yeah, man. So it started when obviously I was a first round draft pick, and then 3 years in the NFL, or 3 years with the Philadelphia Eagles. Think about going through anxiety and depression through the time that I was in Philly. All right, wanting to please the fans, wanting to please the coaches, but I didn't realize that it was more so about proving myself right than proving anybody wrong. So I had the wrong mindset. So then I go to Seattle, and I never addressed any of these issues, and these issues started coming up even to when I was 8 years old. So it's like baggage traveling with me. And then I had a suicide attempt year 5, right after it was in August, in the midst of camp, right? And so right after that, I go to Pete Carroll. I go to Clinton Hurt, who is the defensive line coach at the Eagles right now, who was my coach at Louisville. And they allowed me to go to therapy and get the help that I need. And they were really there for me in those moments. And that's kind of why you see me here today. If it wasn't for them, if it wasn't for my wife and things of that nature, I would not be here. And so in that process of stepping away, as I was talking to my teammates, I really realized that I had to start something that would allow them to speak. And so afterwards, like, I went to the Redskins and finished the year off. I played with them a year, and then I started the Circle of M right after that, because I seen that there was a need. And the Circle of M, all it is a nonprofit organization that is our mission is to unmask the feelings that cause anxiety and depression. And a lot of football players go through anxiety, depression, and PTSD through a lot of the things that we see with football and some of the things that they see at home. And so that's where we are now from 2020 on to 2025. Now we partner with multiple treatment facilities. We partner with the NFL. We were just in the Capitol to speak on behalf of the NFLPA, because we know that this is a need. The NFL knows that this is a need. And it's very important for these players to understand that you do have a voice, and that, yes, we do play a barbaric sport, but you're not weak if you talk about it with the guys in the locker room that you're going through something. You're not weak if you go to a therapist, because now 32 teams, they have 32 clinicians on site. So it's important to have someone like me to voice and say, hey, it's okay to go in there and speak to them.
One of the messages you were giving recently, you put it on your social media. People can check out, of course, the Circle of M on Instagram and all the social media platforms. I follow you in Circle of M on Instagram personally, and one of the messages you were putting out recently was about speaking positive. And that, it's almost like you're not speaking things into existence like it's an incantation, but it's almost like when you speak it, you're convincing yourself of something. Talk about why that is so important for a month like this, which is Men's Mental Health Awareness Month.
Well, you said it, Josh, before we got on. When you talk about life and death is in the power of the tongue. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe that. We believe that. And the more that I seen that I would talk positive over my life, the more that I would see positive in the atmosphere. It's almost like that picture, that meme that you see with the guy on the bus, and he's looking at a side with rocks, but on the other side is sunny. It looks nice. Right. And so if I could paint the picture for you, that's exactly how it is. If you paint a picture or if you talk negative, that's what's going to come out in the atmosphere, and that hurts your mental health and your mental well-being, right? Because you think that you're worthless. You start to think that something is wrong with you. You get isolated. And once you start to become isolated, you feel like no one can help you. And then that's when, suicide starts to come, it starts to creep in. But when you go to a mirror or you wake up every morning and you speak positive over your life, it could be one thing. It could say, hey, I'm going to be great today. And you don't say anything else. Those are the words that you spoke over your life, and you'll see great come out. It doesn't matter what it actually looks like, but you'll feel a lot better. And I think that is very important, without any therapy, without any meditation. But what you speak is what you have. And I truly believe that.
Yeah, I believe it's Proverbs 18 is where it says, death and life is in the power of the tongue. And it's something that's so true because we don't realize how what we say impacts us throughout our day. And it also impacts other people, right? It's the idea that, if you give someone a smile, if you give someone something positive in their life, they carry that to the next person as well. So it's almost like, when you take care of your mental health, right, you're actually indirectly helping other people.
Yeah. And it's so crazy. I was talking to a former player and I was kind of like walking him off the ledge, if you will. And he was having an anxiety episode. And all he needed to hear was some positive affirmations and kind of hear how my story was, because our story was the same. So a lot of times when guys hear your story, they can relate to it. We're guys, we're football players. It doesn't matter. So when someone hears that and they hears the positive energy that comes off of it, they're like, wow, like I haven't heard something positive in so long, because there's only negative things that have been happening in my life. And when you hear that, then that springs you into the purpose that was always purposeful for your life.
Of course, it's Circle of M is the nonprofit foundation. Marcus, plug it one more time for the audience listening.
Yeah, so it's the Circle of M Incorporated. You can find us on thecircleofm.com. Our Instagram is the Circle of M. My Instagram, you can find me, Marcus Smith II, Money Mark 91. I'm actually going to get that changed to the real Marcus Smith one day. But until then, a lot of my teammates call me that. So I put that as my Instagram handle. So that's where you can find us.
Well, it's interesting because, and I didn't even think of this until you just said it. Sometimes it's important for us to have something from our past to remind us why we are in the present, right? Because we aren't who we are today without the things we went through before. So in some ways, it's almost like your handle, yeah, it's an old handle. Some people used to call you, but who you were is a part of who you are now, right?
Yep, exactly. And there's nothing wrong with the person, because it allows you to know how far you've come and how much growth you have. And it continues to remind you that it's okay to think about your past, but also be where your feet are. And that's what I learned along the journey. I don't think too far ahead anymore. And I reminisce on the past, just like what you said. And I just thank God for allowing me to be in this position to help as many guys as I can and speak on the platform as much as I can.
Before I let you go, I got to ask you, because you mentioned your old coach, Clint Hurd, now with the Eagles. Was there a part of you that was watching the Eagles win the championship and you were maybe like, looking at your old coach being like, yeah, man, you got this. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I was rooting for him. I was actually down there at the Super Bowl for the first week, so I got to interview him down there, which was pretty cool. But I'm happy for him. I'm happy that he has a Super Bowl ring. He deserves it, right? He is one of the top best coaches. He taught me everything I know about defensive line. As you know, I played quarterback my whole entire life until I got to college. And he was one of the ones that said, hey, we can use you here and you're going to be great at this. And so kudos to Coach. I hope they win it. They have a great chance to win it again now, So, I'm praying that they bring it out again, because that'll be definitely cool to bring another Super Bowl to Philly.
Well, listen, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. I feel like we've covered a lot of bases here, and I'm sure we can chat again in the future. He is Marcus Smith, 2014 NFL first-round draft pick of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now he is with the Circle of M. Give him a follow on Instagram. Check out all the great work they're doing. Marcus, great stuff. Stay blessed. I appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you for having me.